It's really important to remember that developers do expect negotiation. So same sort of thing with the previous comment around defects and newer buyers, being hesitant to push too much. Don't be afraid to just ask for what you want, whether it's the price or negotiating some extra benefits into the offer, especially in a buyer's market like right now. In 2021, where everything was just getting snapped up super quick, you probably don't want to negotiate too hard, because as soon as you try too hard, you're probably going to miss out completely.
Yeah.
Right now, it's quite the opposite, right? Where you've got a wealth of choice of options and developers are really hungry. A lot of them are hurting.
Welcome to Checks and Balances, brought to you by Partners Life. I'm Michael Vincent. This is James Blair. And today we've got Adam Farrell, Director of Lighthouse Property, here to talk about how developers trick first home buyers.
We're back in your life. Adam, welcome to the podcast. You know a thing or two about property developers.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I've been wanting to be on the podcast for quite a few months now.
We don't just let any riffraff on here, Adam.
You got
it. You got it.
No, I appreciate it. I'm excited to chat a little bit about some of the key things to look out for when dealing with developers, how they trick you, some of the things we're doing with clients to make sure that they're purchasing well.
Yep.
And yeah, just some tips and tricks.
Yeah, cool. So I think when we're talking about your property developers tricking people, that gives a bit of a negative connotation, right? And not all property developers are out there trying to pull the wool over their buyers' eyes, but there are definitely some out there who are a little bit worse than others.
Yeah.
But what we wanted to point out today, I think, was just some of the key things that people should be looking out for when they're buying from a developer, right?
Yeah, and the big thing as well, if you're right, in any industry, there's good and not so good people. The problem is when it comes to a property transaction, if somebody tricks me into, buying a chocolate bar, it's not too big of a deal except for my, big fitness goals. But when we're talking about a property transaction and how much money you're contributing, and if something goes wrong, the financial implications, they can be huge.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's obviously some pretty big articles that have come out recently about particular developers and developments that I've spoken about in a couple of reels. When it comes to property, as you say, it's usually one of the biggest, if not the biggest widgets that someone purchases in their lifetime. So it's really important you get it right. Doesn't really matter what stage of investing you're at. I think it's always important to try to get it right from the start. That's why Lighthouse Property exists, and that's why we do this podcast, to obviously make sure people are across it all.
Yeah, so let's jump into the education piece for our customers then. First thing we're going to talk about, we've talked about it before, and I actually had a completely different opinion on this until we did the episode on it. Sunset clauses. Why should people be worried about sunset clauses?
Yeah, so first of all, deal with a property lawyer specialist. That's the best place to start. Don't just take my advice for it. They're the guys that are going to be looking through it all. But just something that's really good to be aware of, especially now that it looks like we're going to be moving back into an upwards market.
Yeah.
Sunset clause is really simple. I know you guys know this, but for our viewers, we'll recap it. It's a specified date in the contract. It's one of the clauses, otherwise known as a sunset date, where if the development isn't completed by that point in time, or the house isn't completed construction, got title and CCC, the buyer and or the vendor has the ability to pull out of the contract and cancel on the purchase, which is good. The reason it exists in the first place is so that buyers aren't forever locked into an eternal build that never completes, and you can hopefully get your deposit back and move on to the next development. But the risk that comes with it that we saw, and you guys would have seen this probably a little more than I did with some clients you were working with in 2019, 2020, 2021, clients would have been in a scenario where, for example, they agreed on a sale and purchase price of $600K. Over the next couple of years, we're obviously in a really nice booming market, something we haven't seen for a little while.
Yep.
By the end of that, the purchase price or the property value might have actually been closer to $700, $750K in these developments. And some of these developers were like, hey, whoa, I'm missing out on 100, 150K here. And so because this clause was in the agreement and the wording actually allowed the developer to cancel on sunset, some of them were tactically going, well, if I just delay the build, take my time here, I can cancel it and then resell it at a higher price, which was really screwing over a lot of the buyers. Really big opportunity cost in the time that they've wasted. And then those buyers would then have to go back into the market and purchase at a much higher price for the same product.
Yeah, and the sunset clauses also change in terms of length depending on where the market's at. So when the market's going up, they're quite short. I've had one recently where they've had to wait 3 years to get their money back, and have finally got their money back, because obviously developers going, we want to get some sales going, but we haven't been able to fully sell this development. They want more control. They want more time, all those kind of things. So they can move depending on what's happening.
Yeah, I think pretty standard at the moment is about 12 months.
Yep.
Which is probably about standard and where you'd want it. But again, like I said, the lawyer will make their advice on those
12
terms.
to 18 months feels pretty reasonable, because there are delays when you're building stuff. So you want to make sure that both sides are protected there.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. Next one, material substitutions clause. I mean, what does this mean?
It's a bit wordy. Material substitutions clause. Really simple. It's a practical clause that if for some reason one of the products and materials in the plans and the resource consent was out of stock, or you couldn't get access to it, pretty common through COVID times when logistics had issues, it just allows the developer to swap out for an alternative material, which is actually a really big positive for both the developer and the buyer, because let's say, for example, the particular type of handles on the drawers and cupboards ran out of stock. You wouldn't want that to stop the entire build, and then not get your house for many more months and just waiting for this particular product to come back into stock. Just the thing to look out for, though, and again, lawyers will make recommendations on the terminology here. You just want to make sure it's a like-for-like material. And the quote that Emily really wanted me to say here is, you don't want to pay for Gucci and end up with a Kmart bag.
Yeah, there it is.
And so it's just important the wording says like-for-like. Sometimes it's even better if you can get them to say requires your prior approval, so you can be part of it as well, unless you just want to be hands-off, then just say like-for-like. An example would be, if you get a pretty nice spec home with like a marble countertop, you wouldn't want to end up with plywood or some useless material. So it's really important to make sure that the term is right there.
I guess the question is for the average person who, like, say me, if you go, James, I'm going to swap this for this, I'm going to have no idea if that's reasonable. But how are you meant to know?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the short answer, if you don't feel confident, you can always reference it with other parties, either ourselves, if you're working with us, solicitor, builder mates, etc.
To your point before, if you use a specialist property solicitor, this is not the first time they've done these transactions. And if they're going in, if you're really unsure about it, if you send this to your solicitor and said, hey, look, mate, they've quoted me Miele appliances. What is this Fisher and Paykel crap they're giving me? Is that like for like,
hate on Fisher and Paykel.
Your solicitor should probably be able to give you some guidance on that maybe you should push back.
Yeah. One thing I do think about, which Matthew Horncastle spoke to us about, was how using certain suppliers, if they've got certain size, is like almost an insurance policy, right? You're not just putting it all on the developer. If you've got big businesses for like your roofs and your dishwashers and like the bathrooms as well, in terms of leaks, they're big businesses, they'll come back and fix those things. Versus if they're a rinky-dink supplier, you have a lot more risk as well. So probably factoring that in.
Yeah, that was really interesting hearing him talk about that. And that does kind of play a little bit more into something we'll talk about later when it comes to defect remediation and warranties.
Foreshadowing.
I love it. All right. So next one we're going to talk about here, misrepresentation of property characteristics. You're getting catfished on your property. Adam, how do we avoid that?
So obviously you just want to pay really close attention to some of the finer details.
Ooh, not my strong point.
When it comes to checking out the fundamentals of the property itself. And the reason why I wanted to mention this, I had a client recently where we're going through the process of trying to source some really good property investment option. And I put forward a couple of options out in Te Atatū Peninsula specifically for these clients. Really good value in my opinion, probably a little bit below market price. And they jumped on Trade Me, as they should, to reference what I'm showing them. And they sent me through this listing. They're like, hey, what's going on, Adam? This one's $50K cheaper than what you sent through. The description was pretty similar, 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, etc. But when I looked at the finer details, it was only 53 square meters, which is, if it was an actual 2-bedroom, is probably the smallest 2-bedroom townhouse I've ever seen.
Dang.
That's a letterbox.
Yeah. And so just based on my experience, I was pretty easily able to figure out that it was actually just a 1-bedroom plus a study, and they were marketing it incorrectly. So it can be really important just to make sure you're comparing apples with apples. Have a look at the floor plan. Make sure it's really practical. Last year, I was viewing tons of developments, and there was this property out at Te Atatū South that I wanted to check out. It's 3 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, super nice spec. And go through the house, everything for the most part made sense. And then I get to the bottom bathroom, and first of all, it was really narrow, like 1 meter wide max, right? This little slot in the side of the lounge room. And the toilet was orientated facing the wall. And I was like, that doesn't look like it's going to work. So I tested it, not fully, just practically sat on it, fully clothed. And my face was against the wall. So sometimes,
It didn't bring you a certain sense of zen. You were like, wow, they've really thought of something new here.
No, not quite. So even though developers are professionals, they should know exactly what they're doing, the architects, engineers they work with. Sometimes you do just want to go over it all with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah.
And make sure it is practical. It's going to work how you expect.
Yeah. Well, when you say that they're all professionals, I would just kind of counter and go like, we talk to doctors, like people who've made like really good money in something else and go, how hard is this, property development game? And they do things like going like, this doesn't look like there's enough room in here, opposed to those who've built lots and lots of houses and have thought about all those details. Another one I hear all the time is around like, can you get the bed up the stairs? And because they haven't thought about how the stair layout works, people start to move into these houses and get stuck. But if you built like 100 or 1,000 homes, after the first couple, you're going to get the feedback. You're going to do something different next time.
Before we move on, we talk all the time about planning and growing our wealth, but protecting that wealth is just as important. That's why having the right insurance in place can help when life goes unexpectedly.
And that's why this episode is brought to you by Partners Life, a New Zealand operated award-winning insurance provider with over 300,000 Kiwis insured and 89% of claims paid.
Partners Life understand that having some insurance is better than having no insurance. They have flexible and personalized solutions for any budget or situation.
Check out their website in our show notes below.
Just circling back on the comment around the property with the study, the 1 bedroom plus a study. Technically, they can get away with that sort of marketing because a bedroom, when you look at the building code and legislations, only has to be 6 square meters or more plus a window. Which is pretty tiny. I mean, really, you're only going to get a single bed in there at best. It's usually better just to have a desk in there for a study. But technically, they can get away with it. So like I said, just make sure you're comparing apples with apples. It's actually 2 double bedrooms.
I love that it's got to have a window. You imagine trying to sell that bedroom without a window. There's a prison cell.
Wouldn't be very livable in my opinion. And then just the other thing that was interesting, I was thinking about this point. The opposite can be true as well, where they actually forget to note some of the key features in the marketing. It's going to the point now when I'm scouring Trade Me, looking at different options for clients. I've actually stopped turning on the car park filter because there's so many developments out there right now where the agents and the developers are just forgetting to put the filter on that it does have a car park. And then once you actually read into the description, it does have a car park or it might actually have a garage. So sometimes if you just take the time to actually go through the finer details, you might find yourself a bargain just by finding something that's missing on the marketing.
I've seen people miss toilets. Like I've seen, advertisers with one bathroom and it's actually 1.5 because it's got another toilet downstairs, and the listing has just completely missed it. The customer has shown up and been like, I'm getting a bargain here.
I thought you were going to say 1 bedroom, no bathroom. And I'm like, the long drops are back. Everything rolls back into fashion eventually.
But those are really the key points. Just making sure, 1, it's practical, and 2, just take your time to double check and make sure they're not missing any of the key features.
Yeah, cool. And then one of the, things that we sometimes hear our customers complaining about, and the next one we want to talk about is defect remediation, right? And, building a house is a really complex thing to do. We've all seen grand design. No one's under any illusions about that. But sometimes things go wrong and developers are meant to fix it shortly after settlement or before settlement. What should customers be looking out for here?
Cool. Yeah. So with a new build property purchase, obviously with a 12-month defect implied warranty, part of the legislation. So you can always ensure that you're going to get a high quality or at least a brand new condition property. It's more so with less experienced clients, especially when they're buying their first new build. Because most of the time when I'm dealing with first-time new build purchasers, their first home, more often than not, is an existing older property where it was kind of bought as is, where is. What you see is what you get.
And you expect some defects.
100%. Yeah, you expect
it's been around
some
since 1930. It'll have some stuff wrong.
And so that's super common. That's usually their only experience up until the point where they bought a new build property. And so it's more so about just having to encourage clients sometimes to just actually push a little bit harder and don't be afraid to speak up about any of the issues you see when you go through for your pre-settlement inspection. You do want to make sure everything is just about perfect. Now, I say perfect with a grain of salt because if there's some dirt on the deck outside or something like that, you can expect little bits and pieces. But But the analogy I try to encourage clients to think about is, if you just bought your Porsche from the dealership and you go in there to pick it up and the door handle wasn't working quite right, or the indicators weren't working, or there were some scratches down the side of the car, there's no way you'd be driving that out of the dealership. And it's the same sort of thing when you buy a brand new property. And developers are really used to this. The buyers themselves, when they're less experienced, they might feel a bit off pushing so hard, but they have every right to. And the developers definitely expect it. And when you're working with the likes of Lighthouse Property or a really good agency, they should have a process inbuilt for defect remediation. And that agent or myself will definitely go in and advocate on your behalf and push the developer to make sure you get what you need.
Yeah, we do see with some of our less experienced clients, we as mortgage brokers get a lot of questions around this because they go, I'm going to do the pre-settlement inspection. What should I look out for? And it's very difficult to be like, well, everything. I want you to look out for everything. You know what I mean? Now, so we've gone through some of the things to look out for with the property itself, with the sunset clause and a bit of the buying process. But everyone wants a good price. Are developers? Do you negotiate with them? How hard do you negotiate? Give us some tips around that.
Yeah, good question. I'll get you to chat a little bit about the condition side of things because I was listening to your podcast about how to get a bargain. So you can make some comments there too. But it's really important to remember that developers do expect negotiation. So same sort of thing with the previous comment around defects and newer buyers, being hesitant to push too much. Don't be afraid to just ask for what you want, whether it's the price or negotiating some extra benefits into the offer. Especially in a buyer's market like right now, in 2021 where everything was just getting snapped up super quick, you probably don't want to negotiate too hard, because as soon as you try too hard, you're probably going to miss out completely. Right now, it's quite the opposite, right? Where you've got a wealth of choice of options and developers are really hungry. A lot of them are hurting to try and get deals done. And to give you an example, last year I was negotiating a property out in New Lynn, and quite often developers, when they're selling the first options in the development, they want to achieve a certain sale price because that kind of sets the benchmark for the rest of the sales coming up. The lot that I was trying to purchase was the back lot had the most land, arguably the most valuable, and they had a really set minimum price of $860K. So couldn't get them down any further below $860K, no matter how hard I tried. But I can respect that. I understand the developer's logic behind that. And so instead of trying to sabotage their sale prices completely and keep on pushing on that, instead I negotiated in a pretty chunky cashback upon settlement so that they could get their deal and I could essentially get the property at the value that I saw it to be at. So that's one consideration you can have when you're negotiating with developers. You can think outside of the box a little bit, aside from just purchase price. On this property, I also negotiated in some furniture and a fridge and whatnot. I visited the property a couple of times. I'd never actually driven into the car park, which is actually a carport. And when I'm getting to the end of my due diligence, I can't get in. Just literally can't get. It was like a 15-point turn to get into the car park. And long story short, I was in a scenario where if I did proceed, I was going to have to purchase a new car just to get it in. And I told that to the agent and to the developer, and they're like, "Hey, we'll give you extra cash back to purchase a new car." Now, this is more of an extreme scenario, but it just is a really good example that you can be a little bit more creative with your offers and your negotiation when there's a buyer's market, as there is right now.
Yeah, there's just lots of moving components, right? Like if you're their first couple of sales and development, it might be linked to their finance and they might be really keen to get those underway. If it's the last one in the development, maybe they really want to wrap things up. It also depends how their other sales are going. I've certainly run into the developers where they think they're God at the moment because they've gone through a hot streak of sales, while on the flip side, sometimes they're just keen to get anything they can. So it's always moving and changing, right?
Yeah, 100%. So it can be a bit of a reps thing. Don't be afraid to make a couple offers with some conditions on there or a DD clause, because as you say, it can depend on the day when you're dealing with them.
Yeah, certainly don't ask, don't get, and you should definitely ask.
Well, I think the big thing here is you don't know what you don't know, right? So getting some help with this whole process, like a buyer's agent, actually really can make a difference. Because when you say think outside the box, a lot of people are like, I have no idea what's reasonable and what's not reasonable, And again, getting some good help can really save you some money and save you a lot of headache as well.
Yeah, 100%. So Adam, to wrap up, I guess the question is, for the listeners out there who are thinking about buying a property, how can you help them?
Yeah, so it's really simple. Lighthouse Property was established to ensure clients are purchasing really good properties. The process is more convenient for them and time efficient. And ultimately is all about helping clients be a bit more successful with their property investing. So if anyone's listening to this and they're considering buying a property in 2025, whether it's now or later, get in touch. Now's a really good time to talk about at least a strategy or what steps you can take to get prepared. And hopefully we'll see you get an additional property or two later on.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Okay, Adam, thank you very much for your time. Much love to Partners Life for sponsoring this episode. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, give us a review, give us a like, and we'll catch you next time.
Cheers.